Yo, TapScreen Gaming here with an updated tier list for X-Samkok, seeing as we've had a bunch of new units since the last one. Just keep in mind that this tier list will change when there's a new meta, so let's get right into it. Chow Chow's going into S tier. He's decent at rage gen and stealing and buffing. We got Dian Wei, he's going into food. Sima Yi's going into S tier. He's got decent damage and he does splash damage on kills. Xiaohu Dun, food again. Gojia going into S tier. He can increase damage taken by enemies based on the number of debuffs as well as generating rage. Zang Lao going into triple S tier. He's still a damage dealing beast. You know him, he's good. Keep using him if you got him. Just had to adjust the zoom as I realized I couldn't see any of the units anymore. So Lady Zen, she's going into food. She would work well in a full Wei team, but a full Wei team isn't great. Ma Chao's going into food. If he's built right, he can actually be good in like a nuke team, but for the most part, you can just treat him as food. Chao Ren's also going into food. Zuje Long going into triple S tier. He's a great support unit for buffing crit and attack, generating rage and healing allies. He can also cast his skills twice in a row. Got Guan Yu going into SS tier. He's still pretty good and he's worth using. He's got a high damage and a good self heal and some really good self buffs. Liu Bei, I'm actually going to put it in SS tier this time. He can deal decent damage with his bleed stacks, and each stack reduces enemy healing received by 16%, as well as their final damage reduction by 5%. It's actually pretty decent. Jian Wei is going into S tier. He's decent single target damage, and he's got buffs, and he shields allies. Sun Si, I'm actually going to put in double S tier. Because he can use his skill up to 3 times per turn, he self-buffs crit, self-buffs damage up to 125%. Works extremely well in burn teams, just too bad there's not really any viable burn teams as of yet. We will be getting a new IMT unit in, 2 weeks now, and he's probably going to be Immortal Sun Si, so might have a burn team meta soon. Taishi C is going into S tier. He has good single target damage and he has good self shield up to 175% HP. It's pretty decent. Zhao Yun going into SS tier. Does tons of extra basic attacks, which also self buffs his damage, and he can execute enemies under 9% HP. Huan Yiying, I'm not sure either food or S tier. I'm going to put her in food for now until we have use of her magic shield, but for now, she's probably pretty safe to be in food. Sun Quan, I'm going to throw into SS. His skill can deal 450% damage if he's attacking a burned enemy, and he also gets a self shield. If he's the second last man standing or the last man standing, he self buffs 100% crit rate and 50% crit damage, and he casts his skill again at the end of his turn. Zhou Yu, I'm going to throw in food. Zhang Fei is actually going into meta. His invincible shield is super important, as well as his taunt ability, and his unyielding from his talents is really good as well. Xiao Qiao going into triple S tier. Her rage gen and steal is still amazing, as well as her invincible shield, that's really important. She also now has a heroic soul, so that's just even better for her. Lu Zu's going into food. Da Qiao's food. Huang Gai, always food. Dong Zhuo, food, I see no reason to use them. Same with Geng Shunzan and Yu Ji. Dao Chen, I'm gonna throw in SS tier. Her bewitch ability is still really great, plus she can bewitch at the start of battle. So if you're lucky, you can get 3 people bewitched after she goes, and if she's like the first spot in your team, that's half the enemy team bewitched right off the hop. IMT Guan Yu, still hanging out in the meta for now. His damage is awesome. He also gets extra turns, self-heals, but his Hellfire pass is where it's at. He buffs allies crit rate and damage by 40%, makes it so rage can't be reduced below 4. He can seal an enemy's rage generation, and he limits the maximum amount of damage your allies can take by 40% of the max HP for a single hit, so they're not going to get one shot anymore. Lu Bu's going to S tier. He can still do some decent damage, and he has lifesteal, and his counterattack's pretty nice. Hua Tuo is actually a pretty decent healer. We're going to throw her in S tier. She also can apply a magic shield, and she can revive an ally once per battle. So if that's all you got for a healer, she's a pretty safe bet to use there. Yuan Shao going into food. Got IMT Lu Bu or Demon Lu Bu going into double S tier. He would be triple S, but it's kind of a waste to get him to Martial Soul 5 when you could summon for the other IMT units. He's got great damage, and he punishes enemies for stacking up rage with his Martial Soul ability, Slaughter. Plus, anytime someone takes damage from Slaughter, he'll do a basic attack, which is an AoE, and it'll also have lifesteal. Zhang He going straight to triple S. He's also a fantastic damage dealer. He does tons of extra basic attacks and he'll have a crit rate buff. He debuffs enemy defense and self buffs crit rate. After 10 basic attacks, which won't take long with his kit, they'll deal 140% damage to the main target and 80% to the other units in the same row. That same attack will also have a crit damage buff and lifesteal. And plus, he's got his Heroic Souls out now, so he deals even more damage, self-buffing. His final damage while also reducing enemy damage reduction. He's just really, really good. Zuo C, it's actually SS. She'll probably drop to S by next tier because most people probably won't be using Zang Lao anymore. But she can deal damage by dispelling debuffs on enemies, or dispelling buffs on enemies, sorry. Reduce their rage, and can gain rage when allies gain rage. So she's still good at manipulating rage, but soon that won't matter too much, or at least not to the extent of trying to keep Zang Lao away from 14 rage first turn. Lucian, I'm going to put at S tier. He can attach himself to an ally and basically add his health bar to theirs, becoming a meat shield. This also buffs their damage and hit while allowing an extra basic attack after casting a skill. Jiaju is going into S tier. He can shield all allies, has a decent chance to reduce rage gained by enemies, and when his shield is broken, it can stun enemies. Zhang Hui, I'm going to throw into SS tier actually. He's a good healer and heals 4 targets and can either buff 4 allies. He's a good healer that it can heal 4 targets, and he'll either buff 4 allies damage bonus, final damage bonus, and shield himself, or he'll buff their damage reduction, final damage reduction, and gives a chance to stun their attacker. He also heals the entire team and gives damage reduction and crit resist up to 60%. And he also generates rage or an extra heal. That's all through his talents. Like, he's actually pretty decent. IMT Chao Kiao is actually going meta right now. Not only does she steal and generate rage, give an extra turn to an ally after she casts a skill, as well as give invincible shield. Her martial soul prevents healing, reduces shield effects by 50%, and that's pretty much the main reason for her use. She also applies a status effect that deals damage each turn and ignoring defense. IMT Huangzong. You can inflict numb, which is basically a stun, but it goes away in 3 hits, so that's not very great. He also gains rage at the end of his turn if his rage is below 6. He applies numb by attacking or being attacked, and numb causes HP loss equal to 160% of his attack, but at Soul 5 it increases to 300%, which seems a bit of a waste getting him to Soul 5. He seems pretty mediocre for an IMT unit, so I'm going to put him into SS tier. IMT Zhuge Long is going to meta. And the only reason he's going to meta is because he's replacing the regular Zhuge Long. Because even at Soul 0, his talents are just straight up better than the regular version. He does everything his base version does, like buff attack, heal, generate rage, buff crit. Although his rage regen is just better. Not only does it generate 2 rage, but if the officer's rage is below 4, there's a 40% chance to restore it to 4. His crit rate buff is also better because it buffs crit resist as well. His martial soul lets him give extra heals, rage generation, damage reduction for basic attacks and pursuits, gives magic shields, regular shields, and at Soul 5 allows the entire team to do pursuit damage with the basic attacks once per turn. Now, just because he's in here, you don't absolutely need him. You can still use the regular Zhuge Long for now. In fact, it might be a better choice to save your tickets if you have the IMT version on your summon banner right now, because I believe the next IMT unit's going to be Sun C, and that's going to shake up the whole meta as far as I know. Finally, we have Demon Zhao Yun, our new damage dealing king, going right to meta. He has the usual stuff from his original kit, like extra attacks when killing an enemy, basic attacks after casting a skill, self-buffing damage after taking action. He also does the execute, but it's now at 12% HP instead of 9. His martial soul just piles on the crit rate and hit rate buffs up to 120%, as well as debuffing enemy shield and healing by 60%. He also gains 2% damage increase for every 1% HP lost on the enemy. As well as whenever a unit dies, he self-buffs with 10% attack and defense and heals 10% of his max HP. As you can see here, he's actually insane with all the buffs he gets, and he can deal some serious damage without having to rely on pushing his rage super high like Zang Lao. And to combat the invincible shield part of the meta, his execute works perfectly, as well as not allowing people to heal along with Chao Kiao. So that's it, tier list is done. If you're still here, make sure to subscribe and let me know in the comments below if you disagree or agree with the tier list, and I'll catch you next time. See ya.